Hello, and welcome to Morph Minutes, presented by Studio M Financial. Studio M Financial exists to help you change the sound of your money through financial education and coaching. I'm your host, Katrina Pitts, instructor and financial coach. I'm Katrina, your host and financial coach to the small business community, and I'm really excited to bring you this week's podcast. I have a special guest here, Lee Walker of Daily Driver Consulting, and I'll have Lee introduce himself here in a quick second. But hopefully today is just to give you a peek into another conversation between a financial coach and a business consultant and sort of the beautiful relationship between businesses and consumers. So with that, Lee, welcome to our podcast. I'm here at Studio M. I'm really glad you were here. And if you have a couple minutes, can you just speak to our audience about you, your experiences as a business consultant, and kind of what your business is all about?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Katrina. It's a pleasure to be here. So, as you mentioned, I'm a small business consultant. Now, I call myself a small business transformer or a profit accelerator, and I'm focused on helping people service businesses reach beyond their dreams. I use a variety of different strategies to help them do so, as well as a software that I leverage to really help take things to the next level, really to levels that they don't even think about. I'm a big traveler as well, love snowboarding, hiking, and wine and food. So I'm actually down in Puerto Vallarta in Mexico right now, enjoying everything I can and really excited to be more into the Spanish culture, which I've been diving into for the past year almost. And it's really been a great time. Now I work with small businesses not just in the US, but also in Latin America as I've been learning my Spanish. It still has a little bit of a ways to go, so I can really add the value here, but I'm excited to continue to add more value in places that I think really can use the assistance.
Excellent. And I think you mentioned that you were currently living in a Spanish-speaking country now. I think you're in Mexico for vacation, but you're currently living in a Spanish-speaking country. Is that correct? I'm going back in the prior conversation that we had, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I was living in Peru for 6 months and then exceeded, well, as I had about a week left before I overstayed my welcome. And so then I've been traveling around in Chile. Right now I'm in Mexico, and then I'll be going to Argentina next month until I go back to Peru in December once my time has reset and there's no potential issues there.
Yeah, good. Please go back safely and enjoy your time away in all those fun countries and go back to a good place that I know you enjoy being. So thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I love the helping your clients reach beyond their dreams. It seems I don't want to say it doesn't it doesn't sound like the sort of analytical thing that we most business consultants or financial coaches talk about. It's like processes and numbers and different things, but it really is like, what do you want to do and how can we get you to be able to do that? And it's without the limitations, it's without the fear, right? Without the we're not denying the obstacles, but how can we break through those to get you where you want to get to from a personal finance perspective, but also from a business perspective. So love that. I made a little note on my agenda here, reaching you on your dreams and kind of taking it away from myself. So today's purpose of this podcast is to do a couple of things. One, Lee wrote a book a couple of years ago called Navigating the Small Business Landscape, Forecasting Your Path to Success. So I want to talk a couple of things about that I found interesting in that book, but also kind of share the perspective of a business consultant and a financial coach, which I think is a really fun discussion to have. And you'll sort of see some of the parallels between personal finances and how we structure those, how we help our clients manage those, but also the business side of it, how we help our clients to manage those as well, and sort of their the educational piece to help them be successful. So hopefully you all will get that sort of dual piece of that very same coin, the business side of it for Lee, and then the financial personal side of it for myself. Even though I do work with the small business community, it is personal finance based. So first thing that I want to do is, this is my getting to know Lee game, and I do this with all of my guests. So I will treat you no differently, but I will also treat you kindly, like I do every all of my other guests. But this is a 5 things to kind of get to know you. And some of it's like kind of fact or fiction. You can take it whichever way you want to take it. But first things first, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first things first. What's a surprising fun fact about you that either sounds made up, but it's actually true?
You know, it's a hard choice. I have a few of those actually. I think my favorite one is that I've been to now about 46 countries, and I've snowboarded in at least seven now.
Okay. Um, is it, which one do you think is easier, snowboarding or skiing? Both sound terrifying to me, but you tell me.
So they're different learning curves. Basically, the way I see it and the way I talk about it is snowboarding is harder to get good, but easier to get great. Skiing is easy to get good and hard to get great.
Okay, because of balance, speed, agility, control, what's the difference?
Well, skiing's a more natural movement. You know, you're facing forward. And so it almost mimics walking, but like in a weird way. Whereas snowboarding, you're sideways. So you're going down the mountain with your feet, you know, perpendicular to the rest of your body. And so it takes a little while to get used to that. Plus, your feet are bound together instead of free flowing. So it's harder to get used to at the beginning, but then you just once you've got the basics down, you can get really good really fast. Skiing is you start doing what's very natural, but to get really good, you have to then start doing unnatural things like then skiing backwards and putting in different techniques that make it difficult.
Nope, nope on the skiing backwards and nope on the different techniques. We'll keep our eyes forward. So it's almost like water ski. This is a really like stretching the analogy, but it's almost like water skiing and surfing, right? Like water skiing, you're
Mhm.
facing forward, your feet are uh, individual in the sense of they're not connected. Whereas with surfing, you do have that same. I'm perpendicular, and my feet technically are kind of glued to the board. I know they're not, but similar concept. But I don't do either of those,
Mhm.
so we keep our feet firmly on solid ground. Okay, number two. What's the most unusual skill that you would put on a resume? Like mine would be putting together puzzles. That would be an unusual, not really a skill, but something I do enjoy. So, what would be the most unusual skill that you would put on a resume?
Is it something that I would be tempted to put on a resume or that probably never would go on a resume?
Um, oh, do you have an answer for either one for both of those?
I think so.
Okay, what you got?
So for things that I would never put on a resume is I can clap single-handedly.
Okay, like,
Yeah, but you know,
okay. Oh,
so it's faster and yeah,
faster.
you can do it. Yeah, so I would never put that on a resume. I can't imagine anything that would be relevant to.
Nope.
Um, Something that I would put on a resume is potentially is that I'm like the way I guess probably the easiest thing is I've been a travel agent for my family since I was 14. So like I've booked all the travel and everything since my early teenage years. That also probably could have answered the first question as something that sounds made up.
That started when you were 14.
Yeah.
Yes, which also actually explains why you're really good at the travel aspect of it now, from a business part, but also just from a affinity because you've been doing it for so very long. Okay, nice. Two more. What's the most exotic food that you've ever eaten? And I suspect you've been to so many different places, you probably have a really good answer for this.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I mean, I was just eating crickets last night. It's called chapulines
Okay.
in Mexico. Um,
Okay.
I've had guinea pig in Peru. Um, I'm trying to think. I've had some other weird things. I think bone marrow is starting to become more mainstream, but still pretty weird.
Mhm.
Um, Gizzards of animals, like this quote unquote sweet meats. My sister's a
Yep.
chef, so she also has impressed on me to try a lot of interesting things.
Okay,
What would
so
yours be?
none of the above for what you just listed. Let's see, what, because I was thinking through this, what would mine be? Probably something when I went to Trinidad and Tobago as a teenager, because for the most part, the place that I've been to, whether that was Europe or even Costa Rica, Greece, and just coming back from Japan, it's pretty, I think it's really more the style of the cooking versus the thing, right? At least in my
Mhm.
experiences. So for you, yours is definitely the thing. Like there were no crickets. It was just however you cook the chicken, beef, pork, seafood, whatever for the different places I've been to. But the crickets, was that savory or was that sweet, like deep fried, savory, baked, crispy? What was the what was the dish? If you can describe.
So the ones I had last night, they were almost on the sweet side. They were crispy, and so they're almost always going to be crispy. But in the past, they've been more savory, salty, maybe like roasted or deep fried. These were probably roasted, but I don't know if you've ever had a goji berry, but it kind of tasted like one of those last, and I don't know why. It was very, I've had them probably on like 4 or 5 occasions, different places, and this was the most like that, the most fruity flavored one. So
Interesting. Is it like popcorn where you just, dig in the bag and get after it, or is it, plated? What's the presentation?
you can the I ended up at the resort we had like a 50% off discount at the fancy restaurant. And so it was plated with duck and some other stuff. I wasn't a huge fan of it last night, so I only had a couple of them before I just brushed the rest to the side, to be honest. But yeah, I've
Nope.
had them like at restaurants, even in the US back in like the DC area, and they just have like a bowl of them on the side. And yeah, you can just put them in your guacamole and have a few of them and just add a little crunch and a little salt to it.
Okay. I guess protein of any sort is what we're going for these days. We'll do it. Okay. Last one. What's your secret superpower? And you can either make it up or what you would like for your superpower to be, or a real one that you think you have personally, professionally, whichever.
Hmm. I've actually thought about this one before,
Okay.
and I have a friend that his superpower is that he never gets hangovers. And I got to say, I'm very jealous of that one, especially since he's about 10 years older than I am. I'm like, that's crazy to me. Um, and he also drinks more heavily than I do. But
Okay.
um, I think mine would be always thinking about how I can make somebody's situation better. So, some to support of that is, if you've heard of the Nine Whys Institute or the Why Institute, they have the Nine Whys, and my why is, um, I'm paraphrasing, since this is, not scripted,
Sure.
that it's essentially the better way. Oh, that is the name, the better way. So how can something be done better? And so that's always what I think about is, okay, here's what this is. How can this be done better? How could this be done easier? How can this be improved? And I think that's something that really helps me in my professional life. Not as much in my personal life, but the business life is good enough.
I don't know, your friends may feel differently. You may help it make their lives better in some ways by just bringing you and your insights and your friendship. So don't sell yourself short. Your friends and personal life is benefited as well. I love that. Um, I I think there are many ways that that could be applied, certainly, but it's always that way is much better to have a perspective that keeps you from looking at yourself, but always sort of keeping other people at the center of it. And that impacts how you speak to them, how you treat them, how you serve them, how you are very gracious and merciful towards people as well. So I think that spans across a lot of aspects of our lives. So love it, love it. Thank you for letting us
Yeah.
get to know you. I appreciate that. So now that all the funny business is over, let's get down to brass tacks. Let's talk personal finances and let's talk business. So the first thing I want to talk with you about is from a consumer perspective, my goal and my aim is to always help my clients make stronger decisions. And by that, they're usually more informed decisions, right? The better information that you have, the better conclusions you can come to, the better decisions that you can make, and the more confident you feel in those decisions because of the quality of the information that you have gathered, right? So when we're talking through, there was one of the things that you mentioned you had in your book, and I have it pulled up here, but I can't get to it at the moment. But one of the things, you have these cost-cutting strategies, and you list at least 6 of them, I know. But I want to talk about strategies 2, 3, and 6, and we don't have to go in like that exact order. They can all kind of flow together. But one of the things that you mentioned is auditing your current suppliers and vendors. And so I know that was from a business perspective that you wrote it, because your book is for small business owners. But when I read that, I thought that applies very easily to your personal finances. So like, who is supplying your utilities? Who's supplying your cable? Who's supplying your groceries, right? What grocery store is more optimal for you? Or how do you use those groceries effectively? Or is there another way to go about actually building in a good way to manage your finances? And one of the things that you mentioned was consumers want to make the most and spend the less, which I think makes perfect sense. I want to get all the monies, but I don't want to spend all the monies. Now, does that actually work out in practice? Probably not, because sometimes when we get more money, we tend to actually spend whatever extra money that we get. And because we just sort of kind of a lifestyle creep, I think is what they call it. But sometimes it's just because of lack of awareness, right? Which is where we come in. And sometimes businesses do the same thing. They sort of lifestyle creep, if you'll let me use that, in their businesses. Well, I have more so I can afford these different customer, or not customers, but these different contracts, or I can afford these different pieces of equipment because I have the budget to do it, without really thinking about what's the long-term impact with my budget, right? So one of the things that you mentioned is researching alternatives. So what are the different, I want to get your opinion on this. What are the differentiating features that can benefit you? So question 1, why do we continue purchasing certain items and services? And it should be more than the I need it, right? And sometimes it's I need toothpaste, but sometimes there's more to that. So why do you think, and I want you to take a consumer perspective on this, why do you continue purchasing some of the items that you purchase? Loyalty, convenience, those kinds of things.
Well, there's obviously habit. That's a part of it, is once you've started either spending a certain amount of money or you've started purchasing something, it's the theory of inertia. Once you've started doing something, you're going to probably continue it unless there's some other force that changes it. I know, even though I have been spending most of the last year in South America, I still spend, unfortunately, about the same amount of money, because, at least on food and things, because I think I was like, oh, this is more affordable. And then I end up just buying more that's at a higher quality. So I already have this mindset of, oh, I'm saving money, but then I get higher quality and I end up spending the same. And a large psychological aspect of it is, once you've in your brain budgeted a certain amount, as you said, you're going to then continue that unless some other need, where it's either a crisis or you really focus and work with somebody like you, where you're like, hey, I really need to reduce my spending by such and such percent, and what are those things that are no longer important enough that I continue buying. We're also inundated with so much marketing, advertising, and whenever we see a deal, it's hard to not take that deal. Of course, it depends on how big it is. And I don't think anybody's really that excited about a 4% discount. But I know when I go to a store, if I see something that's like 40% or more off, there's a strong chance I'm buying it just for the sake of, well, why not? It's 40% off. So ultimately, there's a lot of different, we're just inundated with so much. And whenever we see something that is familiar, something that isn't causing a new interruption or stressor, or it's something that could potentially relieve a stressor, or it's something that, we talk about, 7 impacts or 7 contacts in order to make a sale.
Yeah.
The current age is closer to probably to 11 because we are inundated with so much. But once you've seen something in a store 11 times, you're like, maybe I'll buy it this time. Even though you don't actually want or need it, but just because you have that recognition.
Sure. And even the history. There are certain brands, particularly clothing, that I will really purchase exclusively because I have a history of good quality or good fits, good colors, good styles, whatever it is with them. And it's pretty difficult for me to stray from that because I know what size I am, I know what style works, I know what those are the brands that actually provide it. Now, whether that's saving me any money or not is really debatable, but I know what that is. And it's, those outside stressors. But the one of the things that you mentioned was if you see something that's 40% off, there is a decent chance that you would purchase it. But sometimes we end up spending more money because we see the discount, right? Like it's just 40% off. And so for instance, would you pay $80 for a pair of pants? Well, I guess at this point, it's probably more like $120 for a pair of pants or a pair of jeans, regular price, maybe, maybe not. But if you get it at a 30% discount, please don't ask me to do the math in my head on the fly, to where now it's like $90, but you buy two of those. Right now, you've now spent more, but in your head, it's a discount. Now you spent more money versus just buying the one for 120, right? So sometimes those sales work against us because we think we're saving money, but really we end up spending more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Or maybe
it's
I'm the only one.
You're definitely not the only one. And a lot of us justify that. It's like, oh, well, we're spending more, but we're getting more value out of it. And that's what a lot of us are constantly looking for, especially us in the United States. We're very, very value driven, where, oh, if I can get more value out of this price, then I will do that, even if it costs me more. And might even be one of the underlying subtexts of the entire capitalist system, but we're not here to talk about that.
No, we are not, but I'm sure we could talk about that here in the future. I think that is kind of part of maybe not the capitalism specifically, but I do think that sort of that tension between businesses and consumers that we'll get into here in a second. I do think that's also a part of it. Is businesses are here to provide that service and product that either the public didn't know they wanted or has been asking for, and so now the businesses are providing this. But finding where your value is, finding where you can get the best value or the best price or the best quality. I think that's where the really fun part, kind of begins for businesses and for consumers. There's one other thing that we touched on it a second ago is we tend to, if we see something that's on sale, we tend to buy more of it. There's one thing that you mentioned that strategy number 6 is called limit excess inventory. And when I read this, I thought, okay, that's definitely been me on things like personal items like toothpaste, deodorant. I wrote them down: toothpaste, deodorant, toilet paper. Like if I see that it's on sale, I will grab 3 or 4 tubes of toothpaste. Now it's just me in the house. So, obviously it's going to take a while for me to go through multiple tubes of toothpaste. But for me, I just know that I have it and I will just know that it's there. It's like a comfort thing for me, right? But $25 later or $40 later, between getting multiple tubes of toothpaste and multiple, cans of deodorant, I have now blown through my budget because I overspent on inventory, right? Like but in my head, it makes sense. But the one of those things, limitless inventory. So from a personal finance perspective, is there anything like, maybe you're not afflicted with this, but is there anything that you kind of had in mind? But if you saw my medicine cabinet, you might be astounded. But is there anything that's sort of in your mind or your personal experiences to where you've had to sort of curtail those basic things that you buy, that you just say, I'll just buy now, and I know that it's going to be there later, and I'll just come back when I need it. And if it's 10 cents more or 30 cents more, it's really not that big of a deal. I'll just buy it then, if my question makes any sense.
So I think this is a typical tension as well. Obviously, in the book, it's really about inventory because of you having to do storage space and you have wasted items, and eventually if it hasn't sold, then you have to throw it away if it's something that expires. In the personal side of things, you also have to think about that too, because products we buy in bulk or mini bulk can expire as well. But then you're also needing a balance of, am I buying this now and so that it saves me a trip later? And the really way that I imagine that you would think about it is, if you look at the full year perspective and you maybe spent like a couple hours one day and say, these are the things that I'm going to need so many times throughout the year. And you can say, okay, maybe I go through a tube of toothpaste a month. Okay, so I need 12 toothpaste this year. Oh, they're 50% off. Maybe I'll buy 4 months worth at once. Or same thing. And it's easier with things that are smaller in size, of course.
Sure.
Things that are bigger in size, toilet paper, for example, you got to go a little bit more.
Right.
But a good workaround with that is scheduling shipments, scheduling purchases. And so knowing how fast you quickly go through things you can be a little bit more strategic around it.
Sure.
And maybe some stores will actually have cycles of when they have sales on certain items. And so you can find that out sometimes, probably through AI systems, or maybe talking to the manager and getting the down low. You can find out, hey, when is this normally on discount? And then you can purchase at those times. And really just focusing on that balance of, when is this thoughtful to buy more now
Right.
versus later to save me additional trips, additional thoughts down the road, versus when is this a little egregious? You can't be like the people during COVID that bought 1,000 rolls of toilet paper and then hoarded it and then realized they were never going to go through it in their life and then tried to take it back. So just for the other extreme of that.
I am not quite there. Although I bought back in COVID times, I did buy, I don't know, like a 12 pack or something of toilet paper. I cannot tell you how many times I have purchased other packs of toilet paper before I used that particular one that I bought in COVID, until maybe like a month or so ago. And I was like, I can't believe I still have this. Just use it and be done with it. And because it's 5 years later and it's toilet paper, it has a forever shelf life to it. But even though I had it, I was still buying other toilet paper. So don't be like me. I realize I'm a financial coach, but sometimes even we are figuring things out. But I have seen this, and we'll carry on here in a second. But you mentioned something about the scheduling of those items and the sort of cycle for that. I have noticed that more companies, especially things like vitamins or supplements or those kinds of things, give you the option when you pay for it to cycle like every 30 days or every 45 days or every 60 days or whatever. And I think that sort of speaks to your comment of the frequency that you do it. And me, I am the type of person who says, no, I want those to last as long as I can make them last. So I don't want you to force me to purchase it in 30 days. I want to be able to stretch it out to 36 or 38 and me take the control over it. But I do think that sort of goes to your inventory management, if you'll let me use that terminology of, they recognize that you have to have a consistent turnover so that that need is built in for you to purchase their item, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and of course it's dependent on the item and how
Right.
often you use it, how often you need it versus it's a other item. Like I have cologne that I've had for 8 years because I remember to use it 3 times a year, and I think I still have only gone through half of it. And they would love for me to be on a subscription model, I'm sure, but that's just never going to happen.
No, not at your rate. If you're using it 3 times a year, I'm sure like the fragrance and the scent mix in that probably has a shelf life. So I'm not even sure it smells the same way as it did when you first bought it. So you might want to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I've also lost like 3 of them. I just keep getting them as gifts, and then I'll use it a couple times. Like, oh, this is great, and then I forget it somewhere. It's in storage. Who knows? Maybe I'll
Sounds
find
like
them someday.
maybe, but it sounds like cologne is not your thing, and that's okay. That is okay. Um, Anything you want to say about that before we sort of start moving? We started talking about the tension between business and consumers? Anything else we want to say on the consumer perspective before we sort of move and slide down to the relationship? Anything else?
I think let's just move on to the relationship.
Okay. So we've talked about this a little bit before. And one of the things that again, from a financial coaching perspective, a business perspective, there's this, I think it's a wonderful tension personally. That's also probably why I became a business owner, is to sort of figuring my place in that tension. Is there's a consumer part of it that we talked about earlier of I want to get the most for the least, right? But there's also a business owner's perspective that says, I want to give you, or not give it to you, I want to offer you something of high value so I can get the most price out of it, right? With the least sort of amount of obstacles and challenges and objections that you would have to it, right? Like, I want you to be able to say yes right from the get go. And we'll talk about this. I'm going somewhere with this, but to me, it's a really fun tension of, no, I want to pay the least, but no, I want to give you the value so that you will be more inclined to pay the most or more. I don't want to say the most, but or more, or at least what I'm asking you to pay for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. But the exchange of that is time from a consumer's perspective to actually investigate what is the best product or service before I give my money. And from the business perspective, it's also the time to negotiate and to understand what would give the client the best value that they would be willing to pay the money, right? Which is where the magic is. It's where the testing comes in. It's the lab of market. It's the lab of seasonality for things. It's the lab of what's the discount that will get people to go, or what's the full price that I can maintain that people will actually pay for, and that real, to me, that beautiful chemistry of that. And so one of the things that you talk about in your book is the principles of urgency and scarcity. So if I can make it a urgent situation for you to purchase with the thought that there aren't many spots left or many items left, then you sort of bring that class together of, I'm removing the price part of it. I'm now sort of giving you the only confines of act now, few seats, act now, few items, right? So we remove all the obstacles and all the objections that you would normally have. So could you speak a little bit to sort of your approach from a business perspective on how you create that urgency and that scarcity without it being a manipulative tactic, even though it sort of is in a way, but without it being manipulative or super pressure filled or sort of high leverage?
Yeah, so of course it depends on the business style, but I can speak to my own. So urgency is, and especially in what I do in business, is the faster you want results, the faster we need to start. If you don't want results now and you want to push things off, then the results are going to change, because it shows that you might not have your own urgency and willingness to work towards something, but it also identifies what do they really want out of it. If you ask from a financial planner perspective, they always ask with, what is your goal in 30 years? Let's start planning for that now. What I say is, what is your goal in 5 years? How do you plan on getting there? How can we possibly do that in even a shorter timeline? What does that look like? And now that you know that it's possible in this timeline, do you really want to wait longer to achieve that? And so you start making people think in the idea of, what is their ideal outcome, and what does life look like for them once they've achieved this dream? Then, and again, for me, is because I don't think I'm going to end up scaling too many. I'm going to keep it more or less to myself and maybe an assistant for my business. And so there is an inherent scarcity in that. I'm only going to take on a certain amount of clients. I actually, a little bit ago, planned out exactly how many clients I'm going to take in different aspects of my services. And so it's not a lie when I say, hey, there's only a certain amount of spots for this. And so if you have the urgency to do this, or if you understand that you should move faster because you want the results faster, but also while there's still a space available, that's how you create that. And of course, there's different products, there's different things that you can do. When you create something like a educational platform, there is no real scarcity with that. You could say scarcity as far as discounts, and you could say, hey, you have this pricing and we're going to increase the price every 6 months, for example. And so if you want to get that same value at this price, you have until this time. That's why you see so many countdowns on every website selling anything. You have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 24 hours, 3 days. And so they're creating that scarcity. Now, fortunately, those are false scarcities normally. They're 9 out of 10 times. They don't actually have it set up that the discount dies after that certain amount of time, or you could just go into incognito mode or whatever to get around those different barriers. But when it is legitimate, and especially with people services, when you're talking about exchanging time, we all have a limited amount of time. Right. And so there is that scarcity inherent to that and what the person offering that service has available just from their own personal capacity.
Yeah, I was thinking about my own. So I do classes as well. And I was thinking this is like a legit scenario. And I was planning out 2026 scheduling. It's sort of right now, yes, it is me doing it. I do want to expand to a team of people so that I'm not the one that's doing it all the time. But for right now, it is me. And I toyed with how many classes do I actually want to advertise in the future? Because if you advertise, we have a class in January, one in April, one in June, one in September, then you sort of build in there's no urgency to this because I can just put it off until June. I can put it off until September, but the idea is that you want people to take the most immediate class, right? So that one, for experience, for income, for kind of getting the wheels turning, it's not really helpful to wait. From a business perspective, I will forego money in January and I will reap it in June if you give too many people choices that are very future and that sort of scarcity urgency piece to it. So I had to kind of go in a happy medium of I will advertise December, or I think it was like October or August and January. So there was a very short period of time for you to make a decision on what classes that you wanted to attend. And then when that one expires, it's January and April. When January expires, it's April and whatever. So it's sort of one class ahead to sort of keep creating that sense of scarcity and urgency for them as well. So real life example of how you have to make those decisions for people, kind of to your point of it's urgent only until it's actually urgent. And you kind of want to create those decision makings for people.
One thing I'd recommend with that is if you create a significant amount of uniqueness in each meeting, you can still plan out farther ahead. And so that way, or you invite certain amounts of conversation into the class. And that way, no class that you go to will be exactly the same. And so there's different things you can get out of it. That way, hey, you want to have people, and maybe you'd say like personal finance for this type of person, personal finance for that type of person, and you cycle it over time. But maybe you have 4 to 6 different variations that attract different psychographics, and so that way you can still plan out, hey, 3 months ahead we're going to be targeting this specific community, and then that way people know that there's consistency, that you're still having it, and that shows trust and expertise. But then also is, if I don't do this one, I'm going to have to wait such and such time before this is more relevant to me.
No, that makes sense. I will make a note of that to the degree that I remember, but 1 second. Sorry, it's real time note taking here. Because just like you all who are listening, I too am learning things as well and sort of filling my toolbox. Because we can all learn new things. Yeah, we can all learn new things. Because the way that the classes are scheduled or structured right now, it's a 7-week course. So there is uniqueness for all of those 7 classes, and then it recycles, not in a bad way, but recycles with new people, right? So you get new ideas and new things are generated within those classes. So it's really like, when do the cohorts actually start and begin, and those individual classes that are in there. But I do like the sort of accelerator classes that I would like to do, and what's the regularity and the uniqueness of those. So I think that certainly makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the what I was leading up to is powerful offer, and this is a really big part of your book that you walk people through very step by step on how to create their powerful offer. But the one thing that I want to bring out in this, and this was the question that personally I thought was most impactful, not that the rest of it is, so you should read the rest of it, but what I thought was the most impactful was in that powerful offer. The question is, what makes me, the consumer, sure that I can believe you? So when you are telling me that you can do X, Y, Z, what makes me believe that you can actually do that? And at the heart of that is trust, right? What makes me trust that you can do what you say you're going to do? So how do you structure your powerful offer to answer that question for them? And one of the things that you mentioned in the book is simple things like the server at a restaurant that you go to, and when you ask the server what's good on the menu, and the server directs you to, the handful of things, the 2 or 3 dishes, whether that's appetizers, the entrees, or desserts that are on the menu, that they can speak directly to because they have direct experience with it. And it seems simple, right? But I've done it so many times where I've asked the waiter, or the server, what's good on the menu? And it's something I was already toying with, but their recommendation sort of solidified that choice for me. And it was irrespective of costs, right? Like it wasn't they suggested it, so I don't know that I want to pay that. It was they suggested it, it was already on the fence, and that sort of tipped me over the edge, right? So there's that built-in trust in the experience. And I see on the other side, and I'll get your thoughts on this here in one quick second, because you're the author of it, so you should speak to it. But I've seen the other side where I've gone to a restaurant and I've asked the very first person, and it was at a fast food restaurant, and there was a new menu item that came out, and I asked and said, "Hey, have you tried?" It was like a cowboy burger or whatever, and he said, "No, I haven't tried it yet." And my immediate thought was, "You're the first person that people see. You're the first person that people hear from. Hello, welcome to Whataburger or whatever." And you can't speak to the newest item on the menu. So in my head, it was well, is it even that good? Should I even trust that this is something that I should get if you cannot actually speak to it? So can you what prompted that question of what makes me sure I can believe you, and how do you, from a business perspective, help customers answer that question confidently?
So let's start because I am a foodie. I'll start with the example you just mentioned is, there's always things or signals. So I'm a big believer in signal theory. There's always these answers that signal other aspects of what's going on. So when that waiter says something, you're going to be listening to two things. One, is it something that I was already thinking about? Because, okay, there's confirmation, and that's good. But if they don't mention something you're thinking about, maybe they have like just a different taste than you, or maybe what you were originally thinking isn't actually one of the better options. But you also have to consider, well, what is the waiter's bias? Are they just saying the most expensive item on the menu? Because a lot of times that's what they're going to do. Now, when they tell you and they're very transparent with you, and normally I will honestly disregard what they say a lot of times if they don't have some story behind it. If it's not, yes, this is really good. The flavors combine really well with this and shows that they know what they're talking about, or, oh, this is really popular because of how the Western burger, the barbecue sauce, and the onion rings are really done really well. I went to this restaurant the other day and they had Captain Crunch onion rings, something I've never seen before. They just powder the Captain Crunch and use that as the breading, and it was really good.
Thank
And they could speak to that. They're like explaining why that was a good item. But sometimes they don't. And so we also have a natural bias that the more information you give, the more likely that it's true. So that can also be used against you, can be used for you. But ultimately, when you feel that the person's being transparent, that is a huge thing that builds trust. If they recommend you the cheapest item on the menu, they're either a really bad salesperson or they're being very honest with you. And it's usually one of the two. Um, I
I'm
mean,
gonna go with
like,
I'm gonna go with honesty. They are very open about how much they love those $3 appetizers. I'm gonna go with that.
yeah. And, but then also you're thinking, well, maybe they just don't have the same, again, palate you do. Maybe they're a chicken tender and French fries person at every restaurant they ever go to. And so you then, oh, well, what's the most popular item here? And so you can ask different questions. And it's like that in other business senses. One of the things I talk to people about is, are you going to trust the person that says they're an expert, or are you going to trust the person that asks leading questions that helps you come to those answers yourself? And
Mm.
so the way my services work, the way I know other coaches that are really successful, they work is they just are asking questions that help lead people to understanding more about what they haven't thought about. I know I'm doing something right when somebody says, "Oh, I haven't actually thought about it that way before. I haven't thought about that. That's actually a really good point." And that builds that trust that someone's looking for. And, for that powerful offer, you want to build trust, but you also want to build excitement. And so when you make that compelling offer, it's got to be something that really engages them. And so build trust, educate them a little bit, and engage with them.
So, okay, so here's a follow-up question. So how,
Mhm.
because some of that can be built over time in a relationship, right? If you're talking, especially from a coaching perspective, right? Sometimes that's not
Mhm.
done in one session. Sometimes it's built over time. So for those things that you have to sort of in immediately instill that trust and build that excitement in a 45-second span of time, whether that's a commercial or a social media post, how would you recommend businesses do that when they can't actually build that trust? Like they're not the server who can take 5 minutes to kind of walk through all the different ingredients and nuances of different palettes and such. How would you recommend those sort of quick opportunities to build that, or is that they just have to see it over time?
So let's assume that the business in question is talking to a client that's in their ICP, their ideal client profile. In 45 seconds or in one post, by addressing what is that person's core issue they're probably curious about. If they're talking to you, they're most likely talking to you because they have some type of financial concern. And so you're going to speak to that before they even mention it. And so you're going to ask them, what is, let's, for example, how is your bank account looking right now? Are you happy with it? Or do you know where your money is going? Or are you prepared for the next 3 months? And so speaking to maybe, are you going to be able to pay your car payment 2 months down the road? So the real issues that people are thinking about shows that you know what you're going to have to say because you've already done the work to speak to their problems. And one of the aspects I talk about in one of my strategies is the market dominating position, and it focuses entirely on finding out what are the hot buttons of your clients and then speaking in those hot buttons because that's what they're searching. That's how you're going to get found, is by talking about their problems. What are they searching in Google or AI or their favorite, AI, MLM, and whatever else? And that's how you're going to be found. And that's how we're going to know, oh, they're talking about the same thing I'm talking about. They might have answers.
And then I think that leads me to sort of from a consultant's perspective as well. And we're going to start get into that last part of it is the repetition of that we can't, it is not a, well, And I think we do this in relationships a lot as well, just in general, parents to kids and friends and siblings. Such. It's like, well, I told you. And immediately it's like, well, I told you one time, so you should have retained everything that I told you and acted upon that perfectly because I told you one time. When we
Mhm.
practically know that's not the case in normal relationships, it's certainly not the case in business relationships with our customers, right? Just because we tell you one time in one media post or in one commercial, that doesn't engender a complete understanding and an automatic latching on to who you are and what you do. So one of the things that you mentioned, you touched on it earlier in our discussion, is a customer has to see something 7 times. And you mentioned it may be closer to 10 or 11 at this point because we're so inundated with messaging. We're so inundated with news and media and just different, not just from one source, but from multiple places, right? So it's just constantly in our ears. So what would be a strategy that you would sort of guide or ask your clients to think about? So how would you get those messages out and the patience to be able to do that, especially if they're in the early stages?
Yeah. So one thing I do after every meeting I have is send a recap email and talk about things we discussed, especially things that should be takeaways for them. We now all have AI tools, of course, if only on video meetings, whereas in-person meetings it's a little bit harder, but hopefully you're taking notes and to come back to. You can also record the meetings instead of taking notes. You can, do it in office podcast if you're meeting people in person, for example. And by also creating things like booklets, like frequently asked questions or frequently given advice. I actually just gave that advice to one of my clients I just brought on today is you provide such a huge amount of value, but you're also answering the same questions over and over again. If you give them this 10 to 20 page booklet, they can have the answers readily at their disposal for those 10 to 20 and then spend your time digging deeper. And that's what I always challenged my clients when I was working at the accounting firm for 3.5 years is here I built a educational system for you to use so you can have some basic foundational knowledge of how your finances work. Use me to extend that
Mm-hmm.
beyond what's possible from an academic standpoint. And you do the same thing is that's why you're creating these classes and you're creating this material so that when they're using your time, it's to take it to levels 3 and 4, not just levels 1 and 2.
Right, right. Okay, so I mean, but I will be, I those things are almost too simple, right? Like we want complicated. There has to be sort of that cheat code and that hack that we can put in place that is the that will defy the algorithm, that will defy, whatever systems that we are blocking. But it really is just communicating and continuously connecting, answering those problems in a variety of ways. Your FAQs, your booklets, your notes, your action items that you give, like the homework, those things that are repetitive and continually reiterate this is what we accomplished, this is the problem that we are trying to solve, and that does build in that trust with people, and it helps them to really understand what you're helping them with or what problem you're trying to solve, whatever. It sounds super simple, but I think it is right. And hopefully if you're in early stages of your business, you are starting to put those things into practice now, right? And trusting that process that it is going to work, that as you are consistently doing these things, and it may not necessarily be the FAQs, but if it could be, here's the one thing that that most of my clients ask, and you can sort of answer that question for them, that it's not 10 different things, it's really the top three, or here's, I studied this really one particular thing that I love to talk about, and I just kind of want to give you a quick summary in this booklet or whatever it is, that people can really start to trust you as the expert, but also kind of get you those aha moments to lead you to answering those questions also for yourself. Um,
Absolutely.
no,
And
yeah, no, go ahead.
and one thing that a friend and other business owner of mine that he always says is whenever he's doing some type of consultation and he's expecting to provide some education on a topic, he does this 3-step process. He says, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you. And that way you set the stage and you said, and of course, when you're asking questions, it's a little bit different. But you start the meeting is, my goal is for you to have a better idea of whatever you're offering is. And then you're going to give them that. And then at the end, you're going to recap it and say, now we've gone through this and you've now should have learned, or now think about this in this way, or at least you understand this other way of thinking about what you're doing. And that also creates that trust because you're setting a stage, you're giving structure, you're following the structure, and then you're closing that structure out. And so people feel that when you already start with telling them what's going to happen and then doing it, that you're going to be consistent in other aspects of your life as well.
Love it. Is there we're going to start wrapping this up. And so I kind of want to get your final thoughts on some things. Is there anything else that you would like for our audience to know? And we have a mix of small business owners and individuals, and so you can take it any way you want to, but just some final thoughts before we close it out today of anything we've talked about or anything that's sort of been that you just recently came into understand for yourself or clients, things that you've had conversations. So I'm just going to open it up for you for the next couple minutes to just sort of close this up here with any sort of final thoughts and ideas that you have.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The first one I have is, if you're ever in doubt of needing somebody's help, you should probably go get somebody's help. I know a lot of small business owners, especially when we first get started, we think the world's on our shoulders and you can do it ourselves. You can bootstrap everything and just by the force of will make it happen. And while to some degree that has truth to it, things go a lot easier and smoother when you just go get help, whether that's, from a business consultant like me, whether that's from a financial consultant like you, whether that's from any just mentor or somebody that has some value that they can add to it that you can trust to provide good advice is massively important. And then once you get past that mental hurdle, if you had it, then really focusing on the people of the business. So many people look as their employees specifically as costs. They look at them as, means to an end. But the businesses that really now succeed and are going to succeed are the ones that treat people like the assets that they are. Talked about the book that we've been talking about today is I wrote a while ago. I recently released another book called People Plus Process Equals Profit, and really identifies the idea that without good people structures, you're not really going to succeed. And I'm actually going to be giving a speech in May, if I get accepted to this, about how people can actually be a profit center. Most people don't think about it that way, but I'll be talking about how that is really where the world is going. And when you treat people correctly and you prepare them for the right success, that they can be your most valuable assets beyond anything else when you enable them and prepare for that. And I talk to so many businesses that when I'll start by asking them, hey, so do you think you're a good employer? And then, of course, most of them are going to say yes. And then I'll just start asking them questions like, okay, how competitive is your pay? How competitive are your benefits? Are you providing them support with short and long-term disability? Or if you don't have the money yet, do you have that planned in? Do you have time off that's more than the minimum allowed by your state or your industry? Do you do internet reimbursements if they live far or if they have to commute to work? Do you provide gas reimbursements? Do you do things to make their lives easier so that they're happier at work? Do you treat them like human beings? Do you ask them questions? When you look for feedback, do you actually implement that feedback and thank them for it? Do you incentivize efficiencies or do you punish it? When somebody comes with an idea that improves the business by 20%, Do you give them a percentage? Or do you make them do more work because, oh wow, they did a great job. They do this 20% faster than somebody else. So I'm going to give them 20% more work. And then no pay additions. Or is your mindset, you benefit as I benefit and raise all the tides? And after I've listed a few of those and asked them again, like I did at the conference I spoke at 2 weeks ago, it was about a third of the hands that still thought they were good employers after asking a couple questions. And so there's a lot to it that a lot of people don't think about. That's really important. When you have a team, even partners, even, in your personal life, in addition to the work life, in addition to employees, but also contractors and, other businesses that you work with as vendors or alternative partners. The more that you treat the people around you like they're real people and you take their feedback and use it and then show them that you're using it, the better results you're going to
have. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that at all. But I do want to. I don't. It was beautifully said and well articulated. The people part of it. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. But I will ask you this: say your book one more time, and where can people find it? And the second part is this May 2026 speaking engagement. If you do, please let me know. And I'm happy to share it on socials if it's a public forum that people can go and participate in, or podcast or whatever. I'm happy to support that. So first, the name of your book again, and where can people find it?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So the book is called People Plus Process Equals Profit. And you can find it on my website. I'm selling it there. You can also email me, and it's all on digital copies at this point. And I might be putting it on print relatively soon. I'm just self-publishing, so it's not moving quite as fast as in other aspects, but self-publishing is the best way to go anyway.
Okay, so what I will do, if it's okay with you, if I put in the comments when I post this on my YouTube page, if it's okay if I add your email and your website in the comments for people to slide on over and either request the book or go to your website for purchase, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. It's dailydriverconsulting.biz. A lot of people will put a .com. They won't go to the right place, so the .biz instead.
Okay, so I will drop that in the comments for people to go check out the book People Plus Process Equals Profit by Lee Walker. And then again, for the May 2026, this will not be the last time that you and I chat, but as we get closer to that, and that is a finalized thing, let's come back and we talk about that. And I'm happy to promote it however I can. And if it's a public thing, people can go check it out wherever they can check it out. I'm happy to partner with you on that one as well.
I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to, our continued conversations, and definitely looking forward to being back on here again.
Absolutely. So with that, it's a perfect way to close it out. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lee. I really do appreciate it. Again, Lee Walker. Lee Walker, for some reason, didn't sound right in my head. Yes, Lee Walker of Daily Driver Consulting, and I do appreciate it. So if you're looking for him, I'm going to put his website in the comments below. And hopefully you enjoyed this podcast. If you have any questions, you know how to contact me, you know how to contact Lee, and we will see you down the road. Again, I'm Katrina from Studio M Financial, and this is our latest episode of More Minutes. And as I always say, until we meet, keep working on the change. We at Studio M Financial appreciate you for taking time out of your day to listen to us. If you have any comments or questions related to today's content, please feel free to send those our way. The email address is letstalk@studiomfinancial.net, or you can connect with us on social media. If you would like to be notified of future podcasts, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Studio M Financial. As always, until we meet, keep working on the change.